RedR Consulting would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and waters on which this podcast is recorded in Jindavick, Australia. We pay our respects to elders past and present.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Brio's Meet a Bright Spark series. Here at Brio, we're really enjoying getting to talk to some of the passionate people working in the training and public safety space. I'm Catherine Burke, and today I'm talking with Gina Jones, who is based in New South Wales, Australia, having recently returned from living in the Pacific Islands. Gina grew up in the lovely beachside area of Wollongong in New South Wales before she went on to do her degree focusing on science and applied geography in particular and biology. I first ran into Gina when she was working for the New South Wales SES. She had a lot to do with incident management and implementing different AIMS roles within the organisation and really building up that training capability there. Gina then took her wonderful skill set over to the Pacific Islands, where she worked with Air Vanuatu as an emergency officer and spent some time on the Solomon Islands as their disaster risk management specialist in the National Disaster Management Office there. Gina has accessed some of her work roles through RedR Australia, that is a humanitarian organisation that helps connect technical specialists with different jobs that need doing around the world. Gina then went on to work with SPC, the Pacific Community, as part of the PMA project, helping to build capability and connections across the 14 islands in the Pacific Islands. Her ability to work with a range of so many different stakeholders, different countries, different cultures, has really helped create change in a lot of different organisations. And I know personally I have learnt a lot from her about coming in and working with different communities and having that understanding and appreciation and working with different cultural groups. Gina is now back on Australian soil, and it's wonderful to have a chance to talk to her, catch up, and hear about some of what she's been doing. I thought just to start with, if you wanted to share a little bit about you and what you've been up to.
Thanks for inviting me onto the podcast. So currently I'm working at AMSA, so the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, as the senior advisor for emergency management. So prior to this role, I was in the Pacific for 5 years, so working with Pacific Community, SPC, as an emergency management advisor in a technical role. So I worked on a project called the Pacific Islands Emergency Management Alliance, where we worked across 15 different countries in the Pacific, helping them with all things emergency management. So everything from policy, legislation, down to training, capacity building, developing SOPs. So a whole suite of kind of work and a lot of variety there. And prior to that was New South Wales State Emergency Service, where I started my kind of career in emergency management, and I was there for a period of about 10 years.
There you go. I know it's such a wonderful resume you've got going. So what about you then as a emergency management, disaster risk management training sort of person? How did that all come to be, that mix?
Yeah, so I guess I fell into emergency management like a lot of people do. I'd come back from overseas and was working in an insurance coordination position, and I ended up managing some I guess crews in an insurance capacity following the Pasha Bulka storms in Newcastle. And so I got a bit of an insight into operations and kind of managing crews and that management kind of angle there, and then applied with the New South Wales State Emergency Service. And I started there in kind of an admin position under their operations section, and they had the responsibility for the State Operations Centre. So I found myself in there sitting in a situation officer chair after I think a month of being with the SES going, what do I do? And they're like, you write the sit rep. And I was like, okay. So yeah, like everyone, I think it's a bit of a sink or swim situation. And just loved working in the ops center and loved that side of work. So my entire career with SES was in that operations, went from operations to special operations to managing the state operations centre to managing their incident management project. And a big part of that incident management project was training. And so that's kind of where my first exposure came into that training space, developing training. So, online aims training, face-to-face, all of those kind of packages of planning officer, ops officer, as well as professional development and capacity development for individuals that were already kind of sitting in those roles. So what does that look like? What does their currency look like? How do they maintain that professional development? And I think, my passion, I guess the reason I got into emergency management and why I enjoy that so much in the first place is my love of working and helping people. So working with people and working for people. And I think I found that calling again in training. So in that training space, you really get that hands-on connection with people, and then they take that and spread that further. And trainers, I often find, are very passionate people. They love what they do. They love working with people. They're always very exciting and fun to work with. And so when I went across to SPC and working in the Pacific, I kind of took that with me. So a lot of it was, incident management is incident management is incident management. So you can pick that stuff up and kind of transfer it, and just make sure that you're incorporating that context. And so I kind of brought that emergency management expertise, but well outweighed by the local expertise and local content that working with kind of my colleagues within SPC. And so, so we went on to kind of implement a lot of training. We developed some online aims, obviously with Brio Consulting, who I've worked with over the years. So implementing that, and then the face-to-face, and then we got hit with COVID. So I was doing a lot of travel prior to COVID in the Pacific, but then what do you do? How do you continue to train? So we switched a lot of that to online, as well as running exercises, familiarization sessions, things like that, but took that COVID opportunity also to develop some training. So having a look at professional qualifications in emergency management in the Pacific, which really hadn't been done before in that kind of professional accredited capacity. So again, you fall into these things, but I think for me, if it has a kind of people component, I really tend to gravitate towards it and love doing it.
And it's quite a different sort of thing, like, working within one of the main emergency services in Australia to then working across 16 different countries across the Pacific Islands, and all the different cultures and things that go with that. How did you find that transition as a trainer and as an emergency management person?
Yeah, it's huge. Getting that context takes a while, and it takes quite a while. And I went over with RedR Australia as a deployee initially for 1 year. I ended up being there for 5 years, and I'm very, very grateful for that opportunity and the opportunity to, extend that contract, because in a year, it's so difficult. I mean, it's difficult to get anything done in a year. Everybody knows that. But across 14 countries, in an environment where you don't really have a network and you are kind of trying to catch up on context, it's really difficult. So I heavily relied on my local colleagues who obviously have all of those networks. But once you start to build that, it becomes a lot easier. So things in the Pacific are very much done on your networks. It's that talanoa, that getting to know people, that conversation, that building rapport. It really is. I mean, I think that's common everywhere that you work, but very much so in the Pacific. It's built on relationships and those kind of things. And so it was difficult, and it was much more difficult at first. Once I'd spent a lot of time there and started to build those networks, it became much easier. But work that I love, like work that I'm really proud of, and work that really, you pour your heart and soul into it. It's often you can feel like just a small cog in a giant, a giant piece of machinery. I never felt like that in the Pacific. Like, you can really see your impact, and you're working at both levels, like, high levels of government, but also within the people, the trainers on the ground, and standing amongst people doing that grassroots kind of stuff, and really seeing the impact that it has. So I have so many amazing Pacific colleagues that I worked with, that I stay in touch with, that I learn from, and that hopefully I along the way imparted some knowledge to as well.
Yeah, and I know that you have a very strong belief in that consultative and collaborative approach to training and implementing any sort of change. And I mean, I guess when we talk, different culture, whether it be a different country or a different organization, it's the same kind of thing. Everyone kind of has their own way of doing things. Do you have any recommend, any suggestions or any strategies that you find, you use to help make sure that your process stays that collaborative and consultative way to make that change happen?
Yeah, look, if you're not if you're building things for people, they're never going to use them. You need to be building things with people. So from day one, it needs to be consultative. You need to be working on the planning together, working on the training together, working on the exercising together. Because when the rubber hits the road and you need those people, you need them to be on board. And so for me, it's, from day one, really clearly know who your stakeholders are and start working with them, start informing them, communicating with them the whole way, making sure that they are a part of the process, not things being done to people. I mean, I find that even in the organization that I'm working in now, if you're building something in a silo, and then you're kind of trying to roll that out, it's, the take up is never going to be the same as if people are a part of that process and really understand it, know how to implement it. They feel some level of ownership with that, and I think that's really the key to getting anything done. Not just training, but any kind of work that you're doing or that you're trying to implement. You can't just build it and kind of go, hand it over and walk away. It really needs to be an integral part of. They need to be an integral part of that process from the very, very beginning.
And that sort of change, it's very incremental and probably not very fast. Do you have any strategies around patience and playing, I guess, that long game to see the fruit come from all the labor?
It's really funny because I just sat in a workshop in the last couple of days and they said, "What's one of your biggest frustrations?" And I said, "Change management." It drives me crazy that it's so slow. But it's the nature of people. You have to understand that. You just have to know that it's a long game and play it like that. So, constant communication, making sure that you're reminding people why we're here, what we're doing, and you may have to do that, every meeting for the next 2 years, but it's really is about hammering home what the objectives are, why we're all here, what we're all working towards together, and those light bulb moments of brilliance are when people start to uptake it, and you can hear them spreading that message as well, and you go, oh wow, it's spreading, the revolution has started. We're all here, we're all here working together, and we're all here kind of spreading that word together. It's a brilliant feeling, but it is hard work and it can be frustrating. But if you understand that from the outset, then you don't let it frustrate you.
It's when you say how it spreads. I think virus is kind of like socially an unacceptable word these days, but but that thought virus idea that
Yeah.
you spread it a bit and then you spread it a bit, and even after you go, then it still kind of spreads around
Yeah,
the
yeah, and
organization and happens.
absolutely. And I stay in touch with my colleagues from the Pacific quite regularly, and it's wonderful to hear like that. It's really heartwarming and amazing to kind of see the fruits of what you planted 5 years ago and what you started to build, and seeing that growing is amazing, and it's reward enough. So, when you've had those successes, you can leverage off those to kind of keep going for the next hard yards.
That's so true, so true. More energy to feed back into the loop.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Now, PM, over in the Pacific community, they use their greatest significant change kind of workshops to help identify
Mm.
some of the stories that come out of these initiatives and these training actions. And I guess that is that it's that rewarding thing of to hear how you've thought and what you've put into place and all that work you've done has produced some sort of outcome. And I personally, I like those little aha moments where you feel like, oh, someone's got something or something's clicked in. Do you have a favorite memory or story of training, or where you've seen someone some change happen or someone's got it?
Um, Look, there's so many. There are so many from my whole career history, like SES, when I was in Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, when I was working with Pima. There's so many stories, but I think one that comes to mind and one that's really special is working with Joe Metto from Vanuatu Police Force. Um, he's, you know, very switched on, amazing guy, amazing trainer, ability just to pick things up and kind of run with them. And he did that. He wasn't really one of our key stakeholders when we went and did our rollout of Pacific IMS, PAC IMS, but which is, I guess, the Pacific version of AIMS pretty much. But he saw the benefit in it for the work that he was doing, and just grabbed onto it and was like a dog with a bone. He just kept calling and ringing and being kind of in our face going, you know, what else, what next, what next? And just that tenacity and, you know, that drive to really provide the options for his community and for his colleagues was, you know, was and continues to be amazing. I used to ask him all the time to get me some photos of himself on his horse with his banners over his shoulder when he was like riding out to do training up in the islands and stuff. I never did get the photos, but I was very keen to see it. But his you know, his approach to things is, you know, just he's so enthusiastic, and it's really, like, we don't want to talk about viruses again, but it's infectious. Like, it really does. I recall being at one of those significant change workshops and him presenting on the work that he'd done, and it's inspirational. Like, people all around him were really motivated by that, and you know, saw the benefits in what he did and how he did it. And he started small, but you know, it's taken them a long way, and it continues to grow, not just with PAC IMS, but just with Joe's attitude and tenacity, I think.
Funnily enough, we happened to interview him on episode 2 for this podcast series. So if anyone wants to hear the person in the first hand, you can check out episode 2 with Joe Meadow. So there you go.
I'm going to go and listen to that, and I can imagine it's probably a great interview if it's with Joe.
Oh, there's something about people who are passionate. It just comes through in their voice. You know, you hear it and you feel it, and it's very true. What about in terms of training itself? Because speaking of workshops, I have sat through a couple that you have run, and I do know from the last time we were working in the Pacific, one of the biggest things that really struck me was just how much everyone over there enjoyed icebreakers and energizers and state changes. It was like this. So much fun, you know, fun learning.
Coconut comes to mind.
Coconut comes to mind. Yeah, the YMCA Pacific style. That's
yeah, they're never ending.
But it's, you know, it's good. It's important to have fun, I think, when we're learning and we're working together. Do you have a go-to activity or a training approach that you find really gets everyone involved and active in learning?
Yeah, so I think for me, and I've been racking my brain trying to remember where I first saw this, but I often repeat this one where, and it's in an emergency management context, when you have a room full of people, and getting people to stand up and line up in regards to their years of experience. And then you count up and add up all of those years of experience. So it might be from the person who's had 1 month that's only just started and been sent along to the workshop as a kind of learning and professional development experience, up to the commissioner or whoever's at the end with, you know, 44 years in the fire service. And you add all of that up, and you know, you sometimes come out with over 300 years of experience, and then that conversation around, okay, that's what we're using today, that's what we're leveraging today in this workshop. It's not about me as a facilitator standing in front and talking at you all day. It's about drawing out those experiences so we can all learn from them. I know that my learning style is not reading or writing. I learn from listening and you know, absorbing other people's experiences, and the things that will stick in my mind are the case studies and the examples that people give. And I think when I start a workshop like that and I get people to do that activity, they stop for a minute and take stock, and if they're at the end where they've got 44 years experience, they'll be like, oh, okay, great, I have a lot to contribute here, you know. Whereas if they're at the other end, they'll be like, oh, I have so much to learn from, you know, in this group. And so for me, that always is one that has quite a bit of impact.
It's quite a visual kind of impact, isn't it? Like, to be able to put it in black and white like that, that's pretty impressive. And 300 years sounds like a lot as well. Interesting you say as well about, you know, just the different ways. Quite a few of the trainers, just speaking to them over there from the different islands that we were working with, and how much they were emphasizing that importance of oral conversation and storytelling, as part of those key strategies that made such a huge difference for the different people they were working with in the different communities there too.
Absolutely, yeah, and in Fiji you call it talanoa, and it's like that conversation, and it's just so important, and it really is the way that people connect, the way that people share their stories. So bringing people together for things like workshops and conferences and things like that is where all of that kind of learning happens. Like, and I don't know, maybe I spent too much time in the Pacific, but that's the way I absorb things as well. It's just I'd much rather sit and listen to a person and learn about their experiences than sit down and read a document. So we did a thing in one of our workshops as well, called the Living Library, where we were trying to extract a lot of those experiences from NDMO directors and other organizational leaders as they started to retire. How do we get them? How do we brain dump? How do we collect all of that information for the people that are up and coming? How do they learn from it? And so we got them to sit, and we called it the Living Library, and they literally just answered a heap of questions and talked about their experiences, and we videoed that, and it's there for people to listen to and utilize, and it was great for even just their subordinates, because often during the workday you don't have that time to sit down and have those conversations, but we just made that space and allowed people to have that conversation and discussion, and it was really, really lovely to watch.
I love that
Yeah.
idea. And I mean, we always talk about, case studies and how we can always learn from what's been done before and what's come before. And, we don't all have time to get those experiences and make those mistakes ourselves. So, but yeah, no, a living library. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it was great.
Now, see, I didn't even know about that project, but that's an amazing project there. You could put that into so many different contexts and parts of that bigger picture as well, like
I
from the
mean,
community and from the traditional approaches to disaster management on the islands. And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a little bit like what you're doing here with the podcast, though. You're talking to people, asking questions, getting, drawing out that information and experience and sharing it with others. It really, it's a very simple way of doing it, but very, very effective. And I find someone's more likely to sit down and listen and absorb something like that than they are if you send them, 10 documents via email.
amen. I agree with that. So it sounds like we've kind of almost headed into the next one, which is about like what's your worst training, or your worst learning nightmare, or what you really don't enjoy about that sort of thing. So first of all, I have noted down, no long documentation.
Yeah, that's a definite for me.
What else? What else is the worst nightmare?
Yeah, so I was once implementing a project, no names, no organizations, where it wasn't something that was welcomed by the organization necessarily, and so we did a bit of a roadshow and had to kind of sell this project and the implementation of this project to the broader kind of audience and the broader organization, and came up time and time, and we knew we were going to, but came up time and time again against those people that just were, they didn't want it, they didn't understand why we were doing this, why this was being done to them. And we face it time and time again, and it's not fun being that person, standing at the front of the room trying to sell something that is not necessarily what the broader organization or what the people want. But it was necessary, it needed to be done. I understood all of those reasons, got on board. I wouldn't have taken on the project unless I did believe in it and that it was for the greater good. And you just tackle them one at a time. And when you normally when you have that first vocal person that stands up and starts kind of throwing darts at you, once you've kind of got through that tough conversation, the others are much easier in the room. People will start to go, oh look, they know their stuff, there is a reason for this, they've answered the questions that we kind of came with, that we were either upset about or angry about or didn't understand. And it's never a comfortable place to be standing at the front of the room when that's happening, but sometimes it's a necessary evil. And if you know your stuff and you're there for the right reasons, then, all's well that ends well.
Brene Brown would be proud of you. It is true though, isn't it? Like, how do you can't train and you can't create change if you're not authentic, and if you don't have something that you're believing in to try and, because people know people, and it shows through every time. Yeah. And it's true, like, if you're going to be there and you're training to have that kind of, so you can share that about yourself, so people know that you are authentic and that you do come from a place of understanding, or that you want to listen and understand more.
Yeah. And like, I mean, for me, it's about purpose and meaning. Why am I standing here? I wouldn't have taken this on if I didn't believe in it. I'm never just going to be there for the money. It's not enough of a motivator for anyone, I don't think. No matter how much you're getting paid, at the end of the day, if you're going home miserable and you're not enjoying what you do and you don't believe in what you do, then nothing is really worth that. So I think, if you tackle things from that perspective from the beginning, and you take on roles that you believe in and that you have a passion for, then it'll work out.
I think we're doubly blessed in that way, because when you're talking about disaster risk management, emergency management, and training, like, they're two very, very passionate sectors. So you do find all the people who strongly believe in what they're doing and are motivated by many things that are definitely not money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you've already mentioned Joe Metto. Do you have a person or a resource that you think is a really great one from a training perspective that people can go to, or someone else I can talk to?
So I think I mentioned earlier on that, once you kind of have a tried and tested method that works, you can normally contextualize that somewhat for for future projects. Obviously within the kind of same stream of learning. So I've stayed in emergency management all the way along. And the world is changing, and online is becoming, whether we like it or not, is becoming much more of a thing. I have definitely contractors that we use, that I've used over and over again, from when I was at New South Wales State Emergency Service to Solomon Islands to RedR Consulting, definitely being one of those. We work well together. You guys have been so helpful for us as a resource, and for me, especially in every organization that I've pretty much worked in. I work well with you. I know your work style, emergency management back to front. When I started in the Pacific, you guys hadn't really worked that much over there, but were able to kind of draw off local experience and context and get up to speed really quickly. So I definitely recommend RedR Consulting as one of my
Thanks
key
for the free
networks
plug.
that I use. But like I was saying, there's kind of tried and tested methods and people that I go to, and mentors and things like that I use all the way along. There's trainers that I worked with back in SES when I wasn't a trainer, that I go to still for advice now. You build that network around you, and then so that's kind of from an emergency management perspective. But when I was working in the Pacific, like I said, when I landed there, I had pretty much zero context at all about how the Pacific worked. So quickly made those networks within different organizations, and I still leverage off those now, even with the work that I'm doing. So there's I guess there's a lot out there, but it's about you finding those ones that work for you.
Sounds fair. So that almost sounds as well like a bit of great advice for new trainers and assessors that are kind of working in this space. Do you have any other advice for people that are trying to do the same sort of thing, come in and train and support and create change? What advice would you have for them?
Wow. So, so like I said, I fell into emergency management. I wish I had have gotten some of those qualifications kind of earlier on in my career. So if you're wanting to kind of break into that space, I would definitely recommend, obviously formal training and qualifications in the beginning. But there's nothing like building your network and finding a mentor and really using those things to your advantage. So I didn't have that advice when I came in, and so things kind of take a little while longer. You need to learn the lay of the land and who are those people that I can go to. We were talking about it earlier, Kath, before this podcast started, about colleagues from RFS or SES that I worked with when I first came in an admin capacity, and I still talk to now. That network, I think, is probably more important than anything. But formal qualifications, I think, as well. Like I wish I had have had those earlier on when I started in my career.
Oh, that is a good piece of advice. You need to balance it out, don't you? Like the paper and the paper with the experience to put it all together. Yeah, no, that's fair. It's all about a balance. And I have to ask as well, because you are the first woman that we've had on this podcast series so far, although I do work with lots of wonderful women, I must say. In your perspective, the whole, gender equality thing, particularly with the focus now across the emergency services and the Pacific as well. Do you have any thoughts around how you found that, or how you've navigated, I guess, those networks, considering that you are a woman in this sector?
Yeah. So I guess from my emergency services Australia days, you'd like to think we were where we needed to be in regards to gender equality and that kind of thing, but we're probably not. And I definitely came up against some interesting situations as a female in uniform in Australian emergency services. But if you are good at your job and you know your stuff, you are still invited into those spaces. I mean, I was working in the State Operations Centre amongst a lot of I guess ex-military, ex-police, things like that are older white males, but I was able to hold my own. There was there were situations where things were sometimes a little uncomfortable, or things were said which weren't appropriate. You need to stand up for yourself. You need to be strong in that situation as a female. But if you know your stuff and you go in there confident, and you use your network. So I have a lot of those people that I worked with are still people that I talk to today and that are still mentors today. And so I worked hard on those relationships. I worked hard on building strong relationships, respectful relationships based on professional knowledge and experience and that kind of thing. And so that bodes you well into the future. In the Pacific, it's a little different. Things are, in regards to gender balance, things are probably not as advanced there. And also going in as someone from an international, it's an interesting situation, and I learned fast. Often the Pacific, I would use, I guess, more senior males to get the point across where I had to, because often it's a delicate balance, because there's a lot of culture and tradition there where women are not necessarily invited into those circles, but it's rapidly changing and it's rapidly more acceptable, and there's so many amazing, brilliant, strong women over there changing that. I worked with some very amazing women in SPC and other organizations, and in a lot of the emergency services, they're working on their kind of gender balance. And so that is rapidly kind of changing over there as well. But you get it everywhere. I mean, like I said, it's an industry that is much more male dominated, but it is changing. Maybe not quickly enough.
Change takes time.
It does. We talked about that earlier.
Oh, no, that is fantastic. That has been a wealth of insights there. We'll add you to the living library for the podcast series to share all those wonderful things. And it's been a pretty amazing, I hate to use the word journey, but it's been a pretty amazing journey. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing all that information. I really, really do appreciate it. And I'm sure lots of other people will as well.
Thanks, Kath.
Thanks for tuning in. If something has sparked your interest and you want to dive deeper, you can click on the show notes or access all of our contact details from our website, www.brioconsulting.com.au, or find us on our socials. And remember, it's not just about inspiring ideas, it's about making ideas happen. Take a minute to reflect, take something away from this episode to find out more about or to try yourself. And don't forget, we love to hear about aha moments and how you have taken action.